Hey everyone, welcome to the live. Let me share this to a couple of places real quick. I'm gonna even give my shadow work class a little extra. All right, this is called Boundaries, Lessons Learned. Boundaries. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Boundaries are a big deal. In society, we have boundaries all around our countries. We have boundary lines, even between neighborhoods, right? Cities. This is where this city begins and that one ends, right? Or this is where this county ends and that one begins. This area, there's a boundary between, I'm just going to use mine, the United States and Canada. There's a boundary between the United States and Mexico. There are boundaries everywhere, and there's law enforcement to make sure that we stick to those boundaries, right? So you will see people manning the boundary lines of our nation, right? No matter how dysfunctional that manning may be. Okay, so not only do we have boundaries around our countries and everything, we have boundaries and property lines, right? Our property lines, like this house, the boundary for this house is right here. This is what you're responsible for. Even if you own like a condo, there's a certain area of responsibility that you have that is considered a boundary. And yet, usually in our personal lives, especially with women of color, we allow people to cross over our boundaries. And you know what? Full stop. Men of color as well. We allow people to cross over our boundaries at every turn. All the fucking time. We think that shit is optional. And everywhere in life, it is not. It is not optional. If you get arrested in San Saba County, they can expedite you to another one. They can send you to another one that you may owe some type of relationship to, or you have some type of interaction with. But if you're arrested in San Saba, they don't put you in a jail over in Wayne, right? No, you're going to jail in San Saba County, right? Because of why? The boundary. You violated. Wherever you were in San Saba County, you violated in San Saba County, so they're going to take care of you. Same thing in your household and in your relationships. It is important to remember boundaries. I wrote something earlier and I posted it about it's important to have boundaries with your kids. No is a full stop. Even with your children, it is a full stop. Why is this important? Because you are teaching them to respect themselves, to respect you, yes, but also to value themselves enough to put boundaries where there needs to be one. My emotional boundaries are for me. I man the gates of my emotional boundary lines, right? Because it is important to me to show up in a fully functional, fully sovereign way, whether it be with my family, my friends, or anyone. My emotions are my own, and I take care of them. And when somebody tries to cross over that and tries to either take ownership of my emotions or tries to tell me how my emotions should be, that is a boundary they don't get to cross. Why? Because as it pertains to my emotional sovereignty, it's all about me. Nobody else gets to pick that shit, right? Financially, nobody else gets to pick how I spend my money. Nobody, right? I take my portion. If I have a particular portion of something that I own or whatever, however I choose to play with that shit is my own. Right? However my husband and I set up our relationship, our own. Nobody gets to mess with that. Boundaries are important. So what is a boundary? A boundary is a line that marks the limits of an area. A dividing line. A dividing line. A boundary is a dividing line. This is where my shit ends and your shit begins. Who decides the boundary line? You do. You decide the boundary line. How are boundaries maintained? I wrote this down because it's important. Maintained means to provide with necessities for life or existence. I maintain my boundaries by providing for myself the necessities I need to maintain those boundary lines. So if I have an emotional boundary with somebody and I say, hey, I'm done arguing about this, stop trying to pull at my emotions so you can get what you want, how do I maintain that? How do I provide for that type of situation? I said no, and that's the end of it. Period. There is no further discussion here because I have already given you my line. And we have partners, we have children, we have people at work that oftentimes want to be like, well, you can't just say that, you can't just walk. Oh no, yes I can, because I gave you my boundary. I said this was where I was not willing to cross over and where I told you not to cross. Hey, Angel. This is where I told you not to cross. Once you decide not to pay attention to my boundary, I am no longer going to engage in this. Why? Because I have to maintain my boundary. If I can't watch television without feeling pulled and tugged and in dis-ease, that is an indication that I am being activated to maintain my boundary, my mental, emotional boundary. It is important to know what's going on in your world. I guarantee you most of what's going on in your world is not related to the news, reality television, game show, anything. It's not related to anything that's on television. I guarantee. We often say things like, oh, I was triggered. I was triggered. Understand what trigger means. Trigger is a mechanical activation. Boom, right? When you have a trigger finger, it means you are squeezing that trigger entirely too much to even think. You're squeezing without thinking. But trigger is an activation, right? This is important. If you guys are listening to this, write that shit down. A trigger is an activation of sorts. And you can either actively hit it or you can pull back. And you're going to get a result either way. It may not always be the result that you want. So when somebody triggers your boundary line, it is up to you to activate maintenance of that boundary line. You cross my boundary, now it's got to be like this. You cross my boundary, now I've got to actively eradicate you from my existence right now before I hurt you. And it's not always that intense, right? Sometimes it's just like somebody saying something negative to you, like, oh, is that all you do at work? Is that all I do at work? No, I do my job, okay? But the thing is, that person has no consideration for you and clearly does not know your boundary line. And it's important that people understand their boundaries with you. So in an instance like that, I remember a time in my life where I'd be like, well, what do I even say to that? Right? Well, the first thing is you look at it for yourself, right? You'd be like, why did that shit bother me? Because I feel like I don't do enough at work, or because I don't feel like I'm valued at work. Because once you realize why that actually is, then you can address it, right? It doesn't matter how long it takes you, whatever. My thing is, the next time you see that person, you can either tell them like, hey, that's my boundary. You don't get to evaluate what I do or don't do at work. You don't have to like it. We have different jobs. Because even if you're in the same job, you still have different jobs. You have different ways of doing things. Understand your boundary is in the sovereignty of your value, of your personal value. When dealing with children, no needs to be no. When you say no, full stop, it needs to be a full stop. Now, I have grown up understanding, what toxic parenting practices are. I do get that. But one thing that I do know is that having boundaries with your children, in addition to the love that you give your children, is vital to their upbringing. It is vital to their internal organization. Why? Because when they come into another situation outside of you, they need to understand, okay, I see that person's boundary. Got it. Not fucking with it. Or when somebody triggers them, they can be like, oh, that activated some shit. Not with that shit. They need to be given that option. And the only way that they can be given that option is if you are actively enforcing, showing, detailing the boundaries that you have. With great love comes great responsibility. With great love comes great responsibility and accountability. It is important to couple love with responsibility and accountability. Because if you love somebody, you teach them, you show them, you activate them into being their best selves. If you love somebody, if you love yourself, your life should reflect that love with well-enforced boundaries, great outpourings of love, and respectful interactions. What's the name of that planet? Saturn, my dude. Saturn went direct. It was in retrograde. It went direct in Aquarius, right? Aquarius, a lot of times we think, oh, Aquarius is so loop-de-doop-de, loop-de-doop-de. They're not. They're just full of ideas and thoughts and understandings. And they understand others deeply, even if other people's actions don't make sense. Hey, Nicole, what's up, girl? Even if other people's actions don't make sense to them, they actually grasp the human mind and the human emotional scale or spectrum really well. So Saturn went direct in Aquarius, which is the sign that it rules, right? And we are finally getting to implement all those things we faced and met and developed during Saturn's retrograde. The beauty of this is that now we have an opportunity to implement and see it clearly. Implement and see it clearly. Most Aquarians that I know in my life are highly empathic. Matter of fact, all of them, okay? They're highly empathic, but they can also read you for filth, right? Because empathy goes but so far. Sometimes you just gotta reinforce that boundary. So with Saturn being direct in Aquarius, it is now time to implement the things you learned when it was retrograde. So being retrograde, it's like, okay, I don't want to have to ever learn this shit again. I am having to deal with this, deal with that. There are all kinds of triggers all around me, all kinds of these tiny little niggling activations in me that I am now responsible for. Boom, Saturn goes direct. Now we implement that shit on a regular basis. This shit should be like, no problem for you now. Because the tests are coming. Because the test is coming and it's time to be creative in those tests. It's time to be mentally, emotionally, and spiritually creative as you face these boundary lines being tested. When someone crosses my boundary, how do I reconnect to my inner self without feeling betrayed? Here's the thing. You're still breathing. You are still breathing. If you are breathing, then you have the opportunity to go at it again. Okay, I need to put in better maintenance with this person. I need to put in better maintenance of my boundaries with this person. What is putting in maintenance with your boundaries? That looks like I am no longer willing to give my attention and time to things that literally cross over this boundary. So I'm not gonna watch not desperate. What's that shit called? Real Housewives of Atlanta, or I'm not going to watch the Kardashians today because they have the same type of boundary issues that I'm experiencing here in this particular relationship, right? Or I'm not going to spend my time watching television mindlessly or playing on my game. If you guys have anything, playing on your game on your phone, because when I do that, I'm so involved in my phone, I allow other things to happen that are crossing over my boundary lines. And that is not okay. It's not okay. You must be active in your life. Hey, Jacqueline, you must be active in your life. You must care enough about yourself to put down the phone, to put down your television show, to put down the book, because I do get caught up in books as well. To put down the book, to put down things, pay attention so you can reinforce your boundaries, so you can be actively happy and participating in your life. It is so important to be active in your life, because when you are not, boundaries are crossed, messages are not received, understanding is not achieved. And if you are interacting with anyone other than yourself, understanding must be a staple of your interaction. A staple of your interaction. You see Medusa up behind me. One thing I love about Medusa, even though I am not necessarily pleased with how they represented her, especially growing up in the 80s, and you had that Release the Kraken show. I forgot what the name of that show, but it's all about how they killed a powerful woman who had strict boundaries about how she was to be treated and approached. They made her story all about that, when in all actuality, it was just about, I have a boundary. I maintain that boundary. I am actively participating in my boundary line. This is where you do not cross. I was watching an episode of The Walking Dead last night, and there was this guy, he's kind of one of the heroes of the show, right? And he was killing off these walkers, which were the Walking Dead, right? And this is right at the junction where the Whisperers, and if you guys are Walking Dead fans, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, just go watch it. It's a great show. Anyway, the Whisperers had just come in. This is where they were introduced to the show. One of them, as he was kicking ass and taking names, right? One of them walked up behind him. They dodged his weapon, walked up behind him, grabbed him, and said, "You are where you should not be." Cut him. Killed him. And it was devastating, right? Because Walking Dead be killing off his main characters. And shit is devastating, right? It was devastating for this character to die this way. But he said, "You are where you should not be. You crossed my line, my boundary. You should not be here. This is my part." And he was killed like that. Every time you allow somebody to cross over your boundaries unchecked, you allow yourself to die a little. To die a little. There's a saying, a French saying that says, "La petite morte," right? And that basically, and I don't even know if I said that completely correct, so don't be trying to quote me, okay? But "la petite morte." And what it is, it's called the little death, right? And it applies to orgasm. Right? So when you have an orgasm, usually they say something, it came from the belief that when you orgasmed, the abundance of that wave kind of stopped your heart a little bit. Like, oh, we're not going to go into all that. Anyways, la petite morte. When you allow somebody to cross your boundaries consistently, whether it be your child, your partner, your friends, whomever, your boss, yes, your boss, when you allow them to cross your boundaries because you need some peace, or you need this, or you need that, you kill yourself, you die a little bit every single time you allow them to violate you. Because that's what the boundary cross is. It's a violation everywhere in life. When you cross over a boundary you are not supposed to cross over. You try to get over Canada without having the correct identification, you will be arrested. and sent back to the U.S. Why? Because you crossed the boundary without permission. Take that as a lesson. Do not let people, places, things, situations cross over your boundary. All that it takes is for you to maintain and man your boundaries. Pay attention to your life. Pay attention to your life. Pay attention to your life. Because when you are not paying attention, when you are not maintaining those boundaries, when you choose not to study how I'm going to, you must be intimate with yourself. You must be intimate with yourself to maintain those boundaries. You must be intimate with yourself. You must know yourself. You must care about yourself. Cut it with the distractions. Have a boundary around your mind. Have a boundary around your mind. Have a boundary around your emotions. This is not a prison. This is actively manning. This is an activation. You're actively manning your physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, mental boundaries. You must maintain them in all instances. It doesn't matter who it is. I said something in a live the other day. It's in my group. By the way, if you want to join my group, it is When Home Feels Like Magic with a K. I'll post it here in the comments. But it says, we do not come from a political stance on immigration. No, we don't. Oh, okay. And we're not talking about immigration, right? We are literally talking about understanding what a boundary line is. Thank you, darling. But when you spend time with yourself, when you study yourself, you're able to more easily maintain boundaries because you're an active participant in your life. Man the boundaries. Man the boundaries of your mind and emotions and interactions. Because if you don't, nobody else will. Put down your phone. Get off Facebook. Get off your games. Stop watching so much TV. Even though I did mention Walking Dead. We watch it on Netflix. It's very good. Anywho, but my thing is, pay attention to your life and how it is flowing. Your children are really good at pulling at you emotionally. Trust me. I got 4 of them. They pull at my heartstrings. And the thing is, I overly pay attention to them as far as well-being, watching for emotional well-being, watching for emotional growth. I pay a great deal of attention to them. And even I have to step back and be like, whoa. I'm so overly concerned with how you're developing that I allowed you to cross over my boundary line. I can't afford to do that because that means I am not nearly as concerned about how you're actually growing and learning as I should be. Sometimes you just get obsessed and codependent. Sometimes you become obsessed with something. But when in your obsession, you're not maintaining healthy boundaries. You're just not. Anywho, my phone is about to die. I'm at 10%. So I do have to go. I do love you all. I appreciate you all. I have some products coming out. I know you guys, listen, I go through these flows and, waves of pushing product and pushing different services. It just is what it is, right? I am still finding that flow. Having started this business, I love it. I love you too, Phoenix. Listen, let me know if you need a top. But I am going to be putting out some more products this week. I do have some candles coming that are supercharged. As you can tell, I have a lot of energy in me, which is why I had to jump on this live really quick. I hope all of you learn to maintain, pay attention, and just hold on to your boundaries and be okay with them. Workshop them. Dig into them. Ask yourself, why do I have this boundary? Why does it look like this to me? Why does this feel like this? Why does this trigger, which we now know is also an activation, why does this activate me to do something? Answer those questions for yourself. When you get upset about something, answer that question for yourself. I love you all. I bless you all. And I hope that all of these words help your home and your lives feel a whole lot more like magic.